It's a Tuesday afternoon in July 1988. You're standing in the driveway of a large, well-maintained home in one of Jackson, Mississippi's most prestigious neighborhoods. The kind of street where nothing bad ever happens. Old money, quiet, safe. The housekeeper called you. She arrived for work this morning and found the house empty. Laurie Hearin, 72 years old, the wife of one of the most powerful men in Mississippi, is gone. Her purse is still inside. Her car is still in the garage. The doors were unlocked. On the kitchen counter there is a note. You read it once. Then you read it again. This is not a ransom demand for money. Laurie Hearin was not taken for cash. She was taken as leverage. Her husband Robert Hearin, 79, had built a business empire across Mississippi over 5 decades, real estate, franchises, financial holdings that made him one of the most influential private citizens in the state. He was also, at the time of his wife's disappearance, embroiled in a bitter and protracted legal dispute over Shoney's restaurant franchise agreements. Former franchisees believed Hearin had wronged them financially. The courts had been grinding through the case for years. Whoever took Laurie Hearin didn't want money. They wanted Robert Hearin to make his business enemies whole. The ransom note instructed him to resolve the Shoney's dispute, to pay what his adversaries believed they were owed, or his wife would not be returned. This had never happened before in American criminal history. A kidnapping motivated entirely by a civil business dispute. A 72-year-old woman taken from her own kitchen to settle a franchise argument. Robert Hearin did everything they asked. Laurie was never returned. He complied with the demands as best he could. He worked toward resolving the franchise dispute. He hired private investigators. He placed advertisements in newspapers across the South. He appeared publicly, pleading for information, pleading for his wife's return. He offered rewards. He spent millions. He did not stop. For 10 years, from 1988 until his death in 1998, Robert Hearin dedicated the remainder of his life and the resources of his fortune to finding Laurie. He grew visibly older in public appearances. He became gaunt. People who knew him said he was never the same person after July 1988, that he existed in a permanent state of suspension, unable to grieve because there was no body, unable to move forward because there was no resolution. He died in 1998 still not knowing what happened to his wife. Laurie Hearin has never been found. No remains. No confirmed sightings after the day she disappeared. No arrest has ever been made. The case is officially listed as an unsolved kidnapping, though given the passage of time, investigators have long believed she did not survive. She would be 108 years old today. The FBI was involved from early in the investigation. A kidnapping of this profile in 1988 triggered federal resources immediately. And yet, a woman taken from a prestigious Jackson neighborhood in broad daylight, in a case connected to an identifiable business dispute with a traceable set of aggrieved parties, was never found and no one was ever charged. The Shoney's franchise dispute provided investigators with something most kidnapping cases never have: a finite list of people with a specific, documented grievance against the victim's family. This was not a random crime. This was targeted. Targeted crimes leave trails. Trails of communication, of legal filings, of financial records, of relationships between the aggrieved parties. And yet the trail went cold. One theory that has circulated for decades among those who have studied this case: Laurie Hearin died shortly after her abduction, possibly from the stress of the kidnapping itself, given her age, and her captors, realizing they had nothing left to leverage, simply disappeared. No body means no murder charge. No murder charge means no urgency to confess. No confession means no resolution. Another theory: she was held for a period and died in captivity, and whoever held her was sufficiently careful and sufficiently ruthless to ensure that nothing, not a burial site, not a witness, not a document, ever surfaced. Both theories lead to the same place: a woman who was somebody's wife, somebody's mother, somebody's grandmother, erased. The Laurie Hearin kidnapping represents a category of crime that forensic psychologists and FBI behavioral analysts consider among the most psychologically complex. The instrumental kidnapping a crime in which the victim is not the actual target but a means of controlling someone else. In most kidnappings, the victim is selected for who they are, their vulnerability, their accessibility, their financial value. In an instrumental kidnapping, the victim is selected for their relationship. Laurie Hearin was not targeted because of anything she had done or anything she represented independently. She was targeted because of who she was married to. She was, in the coldest possible psychological terms, a tool. This distinction matters behaviorally because it tells us something specific about the perpetrator's psychology. Instrumental kidnappers typically share several consistent traits. They are planners. This crime required surveillance of the Hearin property, knowledge of the household routine, and the preparation of a specific written demand that referenced identifiable legal proceedings. Impulsive offenders don't write ransom notes that cite civil litigation. This person had thought about this for a long time. They also tend to be people who feel profoundly wronged by a system that has failed them. People who have exhausted conventional channels and reached a point where they believe extrajudicial action is not only justified but necessary. The Shoney's franchise dispute had been grinding through courts for years. Whoever did this had watched legal processes fail them and concluded that the only remaining leverage was human. The most disturbing behavioral element of this case is the silence that followed. Robert Hearin complied. The demands were substantially met, and Laurie was still not returned. That silence, that failure to release her even after compliance, suggests one of two realities. Either she was already dead before compliance was possible, or the person who took her was never interested in a transaction. They were interested in destruction. Robert Hearin gave them 10 years of his life looking for her. They gave him nothing. Laurie Hearin was 72 years old. She had done nothing wrong. She was taken from her kitchen on a Tuesday afternoon in July, and the world has never accounted for what happened next. The case is still open. Somebody knows where she is.